A long list of witnesses testified at Michigan's Senate committee earlier. Witnesses included Republicans and independent poll workers and poll challengers who said they were prevented from fully doing their jobs and were treated with hostility. NTD's Christina Kim has the story.
Witnesses in Michigan gave similar testimonies of the irregularities they saw in the absentee vote counting process. One witness said that their testimonies and affidavits are so important because videotaping was not allowed at the center. Many spoke of seeing or experiencing GOP poll workers being harassed.
I witnessed the room erupt in thunderous applause and derogatory cheering as Republican poll workers were picked off one by one and ejected from the room repeatedly by police escort throughout the day, all trying to intimidate me and prevent me from doing my job, claiming that I was endangering their workers, trying to kill their people, and even holding a pen in a threatening way. Yet, when non-GOP operatives would stand near the tables and harass me, no one would give them any problem at all.
And from my skin color, everybody assumes that I'm a Democrat. And so they just kind of come to me. And one of the ladies was thinking that let's get these MFs out. And I'm like, MFs who? Like, because she thought I was a Democrat. Then when I pulled out my tag, she looked at me and she's like, you're on the wrong side.
I would get 2 or 3 of the poll workers literally screaming at me to get back 6 feet. At no time were we able actually to physically see the ballot and then see it in the poll electronic book.
Poll challenger Karen Cordes said she barely saw any Republican poll workers. She said she saw military ballots, all in fancy stationery envelopes, and while each ballot had different names, they had the same birth date of January 1st, 1900, which she said was highly unusual.
And nobody could tell me why the birth dates were 1900. When I went to challenge those votes, the supervisor at the table told me, and I quote, "We're not doing that."
She said the supervisor eventually was convinced to write in the poll book that Karen Cordes is challenging this vote and is challenging every subsequent ballot hereafter. Cordes never got an explanation for the identical birth dates.
I was called names whenever my mask fell down even a little below my nose. I'd be called names. I'd say I was killing people, stuff like that, while they'd be talking to somebody not wearing a mask.
Poll worker Adam DeAngeli said he has an audio recording of one of the training sessions where trainers talked about how social distancing rules could be used to impede poll challengers.
So a trainee asks, so if they're 6 feet back, they can't actually see. And the trainer says, exactly, not unless they've got really good vision or they brought their binoculars. And later on, another trainee asked, what if they get really mad and they're yelling? The trainer responded, quote, 911, call the police on them, have them thrown up out of there.
To all of the challengers.
He said the city was setting up a confrontational setting where poll challengers were unable to fulfill their duties. His testimony was filed into a lawsuit on October 23rd and was settled with the Secretary of State, who said they would amend the policies. Christina Kim, NTD News.
During the Michigan Senate Oversight Committee hearing, one witness testified that Republican poll challengers were locked out while military ballots were counted. She said when she did get into the counting room, all of the ballots were identical for Biden, and none were from registered voters.
Patty McMurray has worked as a poll challenger for 9 years. This year, she worked at the TCF Center in Detroit. She began her testimony by showing the committee a thick folder of affidavits.
These are affidavits from Republican poll watchers or poll challengers that witnessed incredible events at the TCF Center.
The affidavits contain multiple first-hand accounts showing the mistreatment of Republican poll workers and violations of vote counting procedures. McMurray said just when the military ballots were brought in, the poll watchers and challengers were told to take a break. The Democrat workers had food and seating provided inside the room. Republicans, on the other hand, had to go to a room upstairs.
When we got back, the doors were locked. I was able to get back into the room, but I witnessed pizza boxes being placed over the windows so that the poll challengers couldn't see in, and those are being placed over the windows by election workers and by the agitators that were down there.
According to McMurray, the state secretary, Jocelyn Benson, said in a radio interview that it was police who covered up the windows, but McMurray said it wasn't the police and accused Benson of making it up. McMurray also detailed what she saw once she got inside the counting room.
Not one of the military ballots was a registered voter. and the ballots looked like they were all exactly the same Xerox copies of the ballot. They were all for Biden across the board. There wasn't a single Trump vote, and none of the voters were registered. They had to manually enter the names and addresses and a birth date of 1/1/2020, which would override the system and allow them to enter non-registered voters.
She claimed that throughout the day, poll workers used this method to override voters that were neither in the electronic or paper poll book. McMurray also testified that when a damaged ballot was duplicated onto a new ballot, Republicans were obstructed from seeing what was written onto the new ballot.
Whenever we would try to watch the process, the person that was inspecting the ballot would stand in front of us, and if we tried to move to the side, they would challenge us and tell us to stand back, that we were too close, that we were going to kill people with COVID.
Multiple witnesses shared similar testimonies of obstruction during the hearing. Grace Coulter, NTD News.
Nothing I have done has been a straight path. When I started my website, I was like, I need a home for all these.
And a woman who worked on servicing Dominion voting systems testified at the Michigan Senate hearing. She says she saw fraud at Detroit's TCF Center, like the same ballots being scanned multiple times. NTD's Miguel Moreno has that story.
So I would just walk up and down the rows.
Melissa Carone, a contractor who worked with Dominion voting system at Detroit's TCF Center, testified at a Senate committee hearing on Tuesday. She says that she saw fraud all throughout her time there on the 3rd and 4th of November.
What I witnessed at the TCF Center was complete fraud. The whole 27 hours I was there, there was batches of ballots being ran through the tabulating machines numerous times, being counted 8 to 10 times. I watched this with my own eyes. I was there to assist with IT.
Carone says the proper way to scan ballots when there's a paper jam is to reset the count. In other words, discard the count on the machine and rescan all of them with the jammed paper on top. But apparently that didn't happen, and counters rescanned ballots without resetting the count. She went on to say that there were people on the night shift who were completely untrained, one of which was a friend of hers that she's known for over 20 years.
They were allowed to do whatever they wanted to do. Nick, and Samuel that worked for Dominion, they were on the stage. They had a contract employee, me, and another one that was from Texas. I have his name right here, Miles Smiley, 90-year-old man there to assist with IT work. And he did not have any kind of background in IT and worked in and lived in Tennessee. So this man was just walking around aimlessly. You know, I was really the only one running around like crazy helping these people.
In an interview with the Epoch Times, Carone says that Dominion hasn't contacted her since she submitted her affidavit. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
A poll challenger in Detroit said in a sworn affidavit that the voting machines appeared to be illegally connected to the internet. He said he noticed an unusual error message on the tabulator's computers, and that the error message may indicate the tabulators were trying to connect to a remote database. NTD's Kevin Hogan has more.
Starts with, once you break that link up at the top.
Patrick Kolbeck is a former Michigan state senator, an aerospace engineer, and a poll challenger in Detroit. He served at the absentee voter counting board from 5 p.m. on Election Day to roughly 5:30 p.m. the next day. He calls it a marathon shift. Kolbeck said the counting boards all had electronic poll books, which are one of the links in the chain of custody to maintain an election. He did not identify physical internet connections to the poll books, but he did notice Wi-Fi networks on his phone, including one called AV Connect. He suspects the AV stands for absentee voter. He became suspicious and started investigating.
I went to all the different tabulator workstations, went underneath the table and checked out where all these cables were routed. All the tabulator computers were connected via Ethernet cables to a network router, and that router in turn was connected to another router, was connected to the adjudicators. Those were connected to another router slash firewall.
Kolbeck said all of these were connected to the local data center. He tried to verify if the voting machines were connected to the internet by asking other election officials if they were. The officials said there was no internet connection. Having seen the physical connection underneath the tables, he decided to check all of the terminals. As you can see in the schematic, all of them had an internet connection based on the connectivity icon in the bottom right corner of the screen. Kolbeck went back to one of the officials to talk about what he saw.
I said, tell you what, you can dispel this once and for all. Just do me a favor, move your little mouse over that little icon down the bottom right-hand corner. It'll pop up words that say connected to internet or not connected. And you can dispel this whole thing right away. And he said, you're just going to have to trust me.
The possible internet connection is important, Kolbeck says, because the chain of custody must be maintained from the qualified voter file all the way to the last step, the final vote tally. He says these error messages, combined with the evidence of 6,000 votes being switched in Antrim County, show why the internet connection is important.
And I would submit that many of the features of Dominion that are being characterized as glitches are actually designed features of Dominion to help people manipulate the results of the election.
Kolbeck's findings are further complicated by a declaration in Sidney Powell's lawsuit in Georgia. In it, a military intelligence analyst has declared Dominion software was accessed by agents of China and Iran to manipulate the U.S. 2020 general election. Kevin Hogan, NTD News.